Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this videonet webcast, where today we're talking about Android TV, and in particular Android TV operator tier as the basis for a next-generation set-top box deployment. Our speakers have all been very deeply involved with the recent Comhem deployment. As I'm sure you know, Comhem is the pay TV and triple play provider in Sweden, and in April they went live with Comhem TV Hub, which is a non-DVR set-top box which uses Android N, which is the latest version of Android TV. But more importantly, it's the operator tier version of that. And it will be used across two different service types, Boxer, which Comhem owns, which is DTT with OTT blended in, and also across the Comhem network, which is either cable, DVB-C, or also IPTV, and then the OTT is blended with that as well. So it's a very interesting sort of hybrid implementation. It's one of the first examples anywhere of operator tier being used by a major service provider, and we have lots to talk about on the sort of business decisions, some of the considerations, technology considerations, and how the project itself evolved. So we will be talking for about an hour and 15 minutes. If you do miss anything, you can come back and catch it on demand. Also, there are resources available today. As hopefully you can see, there are some documents that you can download, and I would encourage you to look at those. We're also taking questions. We're live, so if you have a question, please do send that via the console, and we'll stop hopefully twice during the course of the webcast and address the questions to whoever you like. And also, we're going to ask you one question ourselves later. We have an audience poll, and we really just want to know about your own intentions in terms of Android TV deployments for set-top boxes. So I'll explain more about that later. Okay, well, our speakers, first of all, we have Thomas Helbo, who's the CTO at Comhem. So he's the man who made the decision to go open source and then, having decided that, to go to Android. We have Kai Christian Borchers, who's the managing director at 3SS. His company led the integration, and they provide the front-end UI and user experience, and they also brought in lots of expertise in terms of safe Agile framework development. I'm also joined by Gaetan Delcroix, who is the VP Video Product Unit for Technicolor. They provided the set-top box hardware and also the middleware, which, as we'll find out soon, is crucial in this implementation. And we also have Peter Peterka, who's the CTO at Verimatrix. They provided the content security, which includes their ViewWrite clients for IPTV and for hybrids. So welcome all of you. And Thomas,
hello.
First question. Thomas, first question to you. You went live in April, so just tell us what the market impact has been so far.
Hi, everyone. I would say the market impact is still early days. We've started getting feedback from customers, and so far it's been a very positive experience. We've seen an increased and the highest NPS number on the sort of installation and get started and get things up and running. And we'll probably be another month away from starting to see the actual results of people using it in a daily basis. But we can see that customers who installed the solution, they are using the functionality and they're using the features that are available. And we do see this as another tool in the journey towards the premium operator that we're striving to be. And this is a good path into that direction. So we're quite happy after launching, and we do definitely see a lot of possibilities moving forward.
Okay, and what would you say are the biggest value adds for the consumer then? Because there's a lot of new things on this sort of platform. So what are the key things in terms of resonating with your customers?
I would say that moving into TV not only being from broadcasters, giving the customers a seamless and sort of technology agnostic way of enjoying everything, not only broadcast TV, but also catch-up TV, TVOD that has been available for quite some time, but also the flexibility of easy integration of SVOD providers and new OTT services that becomes available. And with the new Android solution. I think we've seen that things blend together, and we get a really well-positioned way of addressing customers and providing them with lots of flexibility. On top of that, I think one of the key things that maybe the customers haven't seen it yet, but the way of working and having a very short time to market, and we've basically built the set-top box in the same way that we built the multi-screen solutions with 2 weeks release trains, and we have the possibility of launching new updates to the set-top box fairly often, which means that once a feature is ready, we will be able to push it to the set-top boxes, and we'll be able to make it available to customers fairly fast. So time to market and the features that are available is probably the key beneficial things.
Okay, so that's the agility side, and the benefits will just keep flowing from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now, one of the things we hear a lot about with Android TV is Google Assistant and voice search, casting, those kind of things. I mean, these are sort of increasingly important sort of ecosystems, if you like, and it's quite difficult to put them together, I guess, independently. Is that something you thought about? Did you sort of look at doing voice search yourself or any of those capabilities?
No, I would say we did a fairly fast scan of the market, and we looked into the different possibilities. And I would say it's not really an option with the size that we have and the way that Com-Hem is working as an operator. Basically, we looked at 3 different options. There are turnkey, there are RDK, and there's Android. And with that, you're capable of getting all of the functionality that you want. But we felt that with the Android solution, we would get the good experience and we would get the flexibility that we need as in the world scale smaller operator.
Okay. Kai, if people are sort of looking today at choosing between RDK or traditional proprietary sort of approaches, or Android TV, and particularly the operator tier, what would you say are the main benefits for Android?
Yes. RDK has long been around, has mainly been adopted in the DVB space, and is a little bit, when you look at Android in general as an operating system, is a little bit in between Android AOSP open source platform and Android TV. And Android TV brings along a lot of additional benefits and features to the operators that allows a really much faster time to market than you would have with an RDK project. You are compromising a little bit on the flexibility and on the UI possibilities, but you are definitely highly efficient in implementing that. I think Thomas can confirm that, because the time we have used to bring Com-Hem live was rather quick. The features that everybody is targeting for, especially when you go in terms of operator tier, which is the next level of Android TV, is that it brings along the Google Play Store, and third-party apps that are listed in there, primarily Netflix, primarily YouTube, are anchor apps that every operator wants to have on his platform now in order to avoid cord cutting by the customers. And besides the Google Play Store, Google offers the voice search, the Google Assistant, which is not yet live in Sweden, but in many other countries available. And with these features, and there are many to come, you have notifications that are being published. You have even possible marketing activities from Google that they're talking about. So with all these features that are being introduced, you really get a first-class TV platform that is now even DVB ready, and you really have an efficient way to launch this service. And in the long run, you have to also say that the toolbox that Google provides, the developers that are out there in the market are of a very high volume, and it is much easier to find experts on Android not yet Android TV experts, but at least Android experts, that makes it probably also more cost-effective to operate in the long run.
Okay. Well, you mentioned time to market there. So, Thomas, just coming quickly, how long did this project take once you sort of got seriously into it to get your box to customers?
It took close to a year, I would say. We seriously started working in April last year, and we started testing with customers just before end of the year, and then we had a sort of more official beta test in February, and then we had general availability in early April.
Okay. And Gaetan, middleware, we sort of hear a lot about the idea that middleware, maybe you don't need it so much in open source, but it's there and it's still very important. I mean, just tell me, you know, how important it is in an Android TV operator tier world.
So yes, it's true that the word middleware is a little bit abused because it comes from the traditional set-top box. So here in the case of an Android solution, we have a full-featured OS on one side that is coming with all the user experience framework, all the Play Store, the YouTube, all these elements, okay? And then it's being complemented by a series of business-specific features related to the broadcast part, the IPTV, the remote management, and all these elements. So, in fact, compared to what was called in previous generations of set-top box and middleware, we are here on something that is much thinner, but that remains very important because it's what delivers the key experience of the operator, being the live content and making sure that it's being presented in the right way. And the key elements in an Android is to make sure that, in fact, with all these business-related features related to the video that are not standard features coming from Android, to make sure to get them to the right level of stability that a broadcast operator is expecting. Because though you have a very rich user experience with plenty of apps, with very smooth UI, a lot of connectivity or distribution, all these elements, you need to make sure that, okay, your set-top box is still playing live for days and days and days without a hiccup, that you can wake up at any time, even when you go 1 month in holidays, you come back, you press the button, your box is up. And having all these features, okay, related to the video part in an Android experience with the right level of quality is the part that is, okay, is taking the most of time in getting sure that getting the right level. And that's what remains of what we call the traditional middleware. But it's a very important element. Okay.
Okay. And Kai, when you move to operator tier, I know you sort of touched upon this in your last answer, but what freedoms do you get with operator tier? Because we hear that people talk about this as a game changer, where Android really finally get it in terms of what operators want. And you know, so what freedoms do you have, and what is still required that Google tell you must do with operator tier?
Yeah. Well, when Google entered the market with Android TV, they were not really meeting the demands of operators that required a set-top box booting with their own UI, with their own service, with their own brand, and not just being an app in the Google App Store that needed to be searched by the customer and then opened. So with the operator tier, Google really introduced more of an environment that operators were used to and made a huge step forward. And that means the operator really has its own brand and the box is launching. On the other hand, Google has some requirements, and that means you have to have the Google Play Store at a prominent position, which actually is not that much of a problem, because that is one of the main reasons why operators even choose Android TV operator tier, to have the Google Play Store available. Google also asks for specific Google branded buttons on the remote control, for example, for the search button or the Google Assistant button. And they also require a specific way how search results are being displayed in the UI. They will highlight the operator search results, and they will be placed first. But they require that all other search results, including their own ones, are of course also listed in the search results. And so the operator has not complete control over the things that are being displayed. Yeah? On top of that, there are some specific requirements, technical or let's call them like legal, that you need to comply with Google, and that is something that, of course, integrators like us, we are very familiar with, and we can manage to guide through that jungle and implement the solution.
Okay, and your look and feel is a given. Obviously, you can design it however you please in terms of what it looks like.
Basically, you're extremely flexible right now. Yes, with our 3Ready solution, we have a kind of a pre-made UI that has already many features implemented, but in general, you're very, very flexible.
Okay, and in terms of actually implementing the user interface UX on top of Android TV OS, which is partly your job, what are the key integration points? What do we need to think about there?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest chunk in that part is the integration with the middleware. In this case, the middleware of Technicolor, where you integrate with all kinds of features that they link to the motherboard, to the chipset, to the Android TV platform in general. So the middleware is the key integration point, and then on top, of course, you have things like the CAS, the DRM that you have to include. You have the player that needs to be connected to all backend components that provide the live streams. Is it IPTV? Is it OTT? Is it DVB? Is it catch-up TV? Is it VOD? So all these player functionalities need to be mirrored. You also have a big connection work that you have to do with the remote control. Just mentioned that there are specific guidelines you need to take care of and you need to be aware of. And of course, you have to integrate with all the Google parts, like the Google Assistant, the Google Notifications, the Google Play Store. Those are mainly the biggest chunks. And having said in the beginning that the middleware of Technicolor was one of in the project we've done with Comham, was one of the biggest pieces of work. I think it's fair to say that our front-end 3Ready, together with the Technicolor middleware, is probably the backbone of this project's technical success there.
Okay, well, Gaetan, that sort of leads nicely to you. And in terms of the hardware itself, what do you need to sort of bring on board if you want to maximize the value from Android TV? I mean, is this just a matter of, choosing a nice juicy set-top with a big CPU and it will come out lovely? I mean, run through what we need to think about. So
one of the key elements that will really work on the UI is the GPU. Okay, so the graphic processing unit is really the key element that will make the smoothness on the UI. Okay, that's very, very important element, and that's really what will bring all the buttery feeling and everything. And the GPU to work well will be really the interoperability with the memory. Okay, so the bus, the capacity of the bus, the bandwidth that you have between the memory and the chipset will be key to get the buttery feeling. Okay, then you have the CPU part in the chipset that is clearly impacting your boot time, will impacting how the first apps are when the apps are being launched, but it's a little bit of a less essential part because, in fact, what you see that everything is being accelerated by the GPU or the transition. So, I mean, most of, and in the case of the 3SS UI, we have plenty of the elements that are being downloaded before that being put in cache. So making sure that is getting the GPU can operate very quickly and in a very smooth way. So the CPU, in fact, you have mostly two cores that are working, which is one that is the main for the active, and eventually on one of the second core that is being used in the background for some tasks, but it's a part. So I would say that the key element is the power of the GPU, okay, that is key, and the second part is really the CPU that will help some of the elements I explained. After you will have for some of the broadcast feature, there will be the cast integration, will be the video capabilities in terms of codec that will be important. But the key element, I really think you have to think about it like you have on a smartphone. When you change from a generation of smartphone to another generation of smartphone, I mean, suddenly you feel that your UI is getting just smoother, better, just because you have a new chipset that is a bit more powerful. This is one of the beauty of Android, is that you automatically see the benefit of the horsepower that you have in the device. Okay, and that was not always the case before in previous generation of devices that were not relying on Android, because not in all the acceleration were there. Here, given that all the UI framework where all the acceleration are already done and benefiting automatically of the chipset, you have really an experience that takes all the benefit of the chipset.
Okay, and is there a good choice of chipsets if you want to work with Android TV?
But it's one of the key elements will be, I mean, and we see it, is that in fact all the chipsets that are being used now for Android TV are chipsets that are very much aligned with smartphone. So what we see is that we have seen appearing a generation of chipsets that were quad-core ARMs with a GPU that is a thing. So we see this ARM-based GPU or Imagination GPU or some specific others. So that's really bringing the Android part has been dragging all this technology from the mobile. After, in the case of an operator, like when we work with Command, there is a very important aspect, okay, that is also linked to the video part. And there is an importance on how they will be able to have the cast integration and the codec support, all the video-related elements that are important, okay? So it's a combination of, on one side, a chipset that has characteristics that are very similar to mobile phone industry chipset, and second thing, dragging what makes that a set-top box chipset and having all these legacy feature and mostly the security elements. That is clearly a very important point.
Okay, and just very quickly, RDK make a big point of how easy it is to bring on new chipsets. So if you want to change chipsets for your next version of the box, you can run multiple SOCs, multiple generations of SOCs very comfortably. Is that the case with Android? Just quickly.
Yes, it's definitely the case with Android. One of the beauty of Android TV is that Google has very well standardized all the API, which means that the UI is relying mostly on at 99.9% on already documented and well-defined API, which makes that in fact there is a limited reliance between the user experience and what is behind on the device. And then for people like Technicolor, we are integrating our middleware features outside of the set-top box together with the Android, but in fact for the UI, it's mostly about switching between one video service to another video service, and all is being managed by the OS, so which makes that it's quite transparent for the user experience.
Okay, and Petter, in terms of the content security, is there anything that's mandated when you come into the Android TV operator tier environment?
John, the pay TV security is typically not defined by the middleware or the platform provider or the set-top box vendor, but it's rather defined by the content owners, and it's done in collaboration with content protection vendors like Verimatrix. If you look at the most publicly available document is the Movie Labs Enhanced Content Protection Specification, which outlines the requirements of content owners. And in the past, the main defense was to prevent software modifications on the set-top box or to prevent unauthorized software or applications to be running on a set-top box. But with the openness of Android, this goal is really unachievable. Therefore, you must isolate the content protection aspects from the Android and all the apps in an isolated and secure and protected area.
Okay, so that's the trusted execution environment, I assume. And I mean, Android generally, people always used to worry because it's open, you need to isolate it. And did that isolation just happen as a result of the UHD Movie Labs? Because there was a big advance in sort of technology across the security board. Is it all kind of taken care of now?
So in the early days of Android TV, and as we all know, Android TV has been around for a while, the main defense mechanism was to completely isolate the pay TV stack from the Android application stack. But this certainly, this is not an ideal solution, and it ended up with kind of highly custom integration projects. But with the availability of highly secure SoCs, it is now possible to isolate the premium content processing from the rest of the Android platform. And this includes decryption, decoding, watermarking, and either rendering or a protected output. So these are all security features that are pretty much independent of Android. And specifically, the SoCs today have hardware root of trust, the trusted execution environment. What's very important is the secure video path. There's watermarking built into these chipsets, and then there is robust output control such as HDCP 2.2. And to be more specific, you really start with a secure SoC that has a unique unmutable hardware ID. It has a set of unique keys that are used for very targeted and secure communication. And this hardware-based security is extended with what's called key ladders, which are used to derive the content decryption keys. And then the actual communication with the device, the authentication, the secure messaging, and additional logic is executed inside the trusted execution environment. And the actual decryption of the content and then later on decoding and watermarking is protected by the secure video path. And again, that isolates the whole premium content processing away from Android or the related applications.
Okay. And even inside the trusted execution environment, your security is in there, and then also any other apps that are in there are also isolated from you, is that right? So you're not just isolated from outside the trusted execution environment, but within the execution environment, all the different apps operating in there are also isolated from each other, is that right?
Absolutely. And so when you select a SOC, it obviously must have the hardware-based security. It must have a trusted execution environment, but you need to choose the one that actually allows you to isolate even the trusted applications that are executing in the TEE. You need to isolate them from each other so they can't cause any harm to each other.
Okay, so what? Very quickly, what would that harm be? What would happen? One of the other apps gets kind of invaded and starts to try and do something.
Well, it could be two things, right? It could be accidental, one stepping on top of each other and causing, unpredictable behavior, or it could be hacking or a rogue trusted application, so to speak, that could either redirect the content output or could expose keys or could there's watermarking performed in the TE as well, and so it could harm that.
Okay, and in terms of the streaming services that are on board, like Netflix, and obviously Comhem has the broadcaster players like from TV4 and SVT. Are they just completely separate, independent affairs? So they deal with their own content security, nothing to do with you?
Well, so chip vendors typically integrate multiple security solutions into the chip, including different CA and DRM solutions. And when we test and certify chips, we make sure that all of these run together without harming each other.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to now publish our audience poll, and you'll have a few moments to look at this and think about it. And then we'll do some audience questions, then we'll come back to the poll. So you should be able to see it now. So the question is, how likely is it that you will be involved in an Android TV set-top box deployment within the next 2 years? And we're talking about any kind of Android TV here. So it could be AOSP, it could be Android TV, or it could be operator tier. But just tell us whether you're definitely, probably, unlikely, or definitely not going to be involved in an Android TV STB deployment of some kind. So 24 months is the timescale we're asking for. And just do some, I'll go through some questions that we've got from the audience now. So first of all, I think I'll aim this at you, Thomas. Hopefully you know the answer to this. This is from Vasilis Georginian at Windhellas, and he's saying, if you select operator tier, are there any disadvantages in terms of upgrading to a new Android OS version? Will new features be automatically available, or is there extra development needed?
I would say, as a general rule, you would get all the updates that are included in Android. Of course, if you want to take full advantage of all of the functionalities, you would need to do some kind of integration, either in the UI or in the backend, depending on the functionalities. But as a general rule of thumb, you could say that once you get into the Google custom launcher track and you get the continuous updates, you'll be able to leverage on the functionalities that are available.
Okay. There's another question here. This is for you as well, Thomas, really, from Pravesh Kumar at Cisco, and he's saying, does Android operator tier ensure that DTH operators, or I guess any other operator, has control over what content subscriber watches from, for example, installing competitive applications from the Play Store? Now, I guess this is a key question for a lot of operators. You have to allow other apps on board. I mean, it must be a concern that people will go and watch a rival app, I guess. I mean, do you have any control at all?
No, basically you don't. I would say that's one of the key discussions we had internally before deciding to launch. But I think the conclusion that we took, and it of course needs to be proven in the coming months, but the decision we took was that by working in a very open environment, we also ensure that the customers have access to the type of content they would want to get. And they would probably get access to this content anyway. And by having it controlled into our environment, and we have control about apps that we want to make sure they're pre-installed, that are featured, that are highlighted, and then apps that is not part of the solution that we're providing, which could be competitive content or things that we would like not to promote, they can be put gently away in a not so attractive part of the UI.
Right. Okay. So subtle techniques. Okay. I've got another question. Kai, this one I think it was probably for you. It's from Chris Van Hoven at The Other Things, and he's saying, as Google TV has very strict limitations in terms of UI design, how many degrees of freedom do you really get with Android TV operator tier for designing your own GUI? Kai, you said that basically you're extremely flexible, so it's quoted you there. Are there mandatory guidelines?
Well, there are mandatory guidelines, but they are being more and more softened up. I remember that when we started other projects, there were much more stricter guidelines. But when you look at the UIs that are coming out now, they are extremely flexible, and mainly you need to follow the user guidelines. How many clicks away is certain content from Google? stuff like this. This is what you need to comply on. But in terms of design and layout, you're at the moment very flexible already.
Okay. One more question for you.
One comment on that from my side. I would say that was one of the concerns we had as well. But as Kai said, I think Google has improved during the process, and we've gotten the flexibility that we were hoping for.
Okay, one more question. I think it must be you again, Thomas. So this is from Kariel Nizam at Astro Malaysia. How do you get the analytical data, such as operational monitoring, as well as the user navigation and consumption? So I guess he's talking about how much data you get, and I suppose that depends whether you're in your app or it's someone else's app. But just give us a rundown. I mean, what do you see from this box?
You see almost everything. We use streaming telemetry to access the data, and we put that into our backend that we're using with the multi-screen solution as well. And we have access to everything related to usage data. If customers are moving in this direction or this direction, if they take the choice that we want them to take. But also we get access to the operational side of stuff, so we can see if there's a bad signal, if there's packet loss, if there's anything, which is then being streamed into the solution that we have for sort of trying to mitigate and make sure we get the best data available for the customer service and for the product teams to continuously improve the look and feel and the access to content.
Okay, right. I'm going to show the poll results now, so you should be able to see them now. So the answers are people who will definitely be involved in an Android TV set-top box deployment within 2 years, 59%, probably 32%, unlikely 8 or nearly 9%, and definitely not, hardly anyone. So there's an awful lot of interest in Android TV. I guess the fact that we're talking about Android TV has probably attracted people who are more likely than not to be using it, of course. But it's nonetheless very interesting and suggests a lot of market potential for it. So anyway, let's move on with the rest of the questions then. So Thomas, back to you. In terms of the project, how does it differ if you kind of go down a sort of open source and then an Android road to how we used to do set-top box launches, where you had a sort of traditional, set-top box, but also middleware provider, and the middleware provider kind of had a big took a lot of the responsibility onto themselves?
I think that this project was a new way of working, at least from our side on the set-top box, since this was not a turnkey solution, as you say, where we order something and then we get a delivery maybe a year later, and then we can start doing the integration and the testing. This was a very joint project with ComM, working very closely together with 3SS and with Technicolor, Google, Verimatrix, all of the different parties, and Netflix were included, and we worked very close with them to make sure we get the integration up and running. And I would say that it is a very different way of working. Okay.
And in terms of time to market, I mean, we'll go into more detail in how those differences play through in a moment. So, but in terms of time to market, 12 months. Where did the savings actually come from? So, is there something that happens in the project itself, or is that just to do with the sort of pre-integrations that you get with Google? How do you make the time savings?
I would say it is several things. We took the Technicolor set-top box and their middleware, which is basically providing us with the DVB and the CA part that is not part of the Android solution. And then on top of that, we took the 3SS solution that provided us with a good UI that we were able to modify in the ways that we wanted to do things. But that's just picking standard components off the shelf, basically. I think the way of working, we worked using the safe way of working, and we introduced that in the project as part of the sort of plan to get things moving quite fastly. And one of the key things that we identified was that there's a lot less waiting time. So people don't wait for each other. We had a big room meeting where everybody was involved and everybody was invited and participated. And then we coordinated what needed to be done in the coming 6, 8, 12 weeks. And then people were fully aware of the dependencies and what needed to be done, who needed to do what. And we sort of got the alignment between the different parties in the project during that day of planning. So that was, I would say, the biggest impact we did was bringing down waiting time for people to reply and have different meetings, because everything was done in one day. When meeting and then people went home working, we had, of course, daily contacts and things were up and running, but then you met 6 weeks later and then you started planning for the coming 6 weeks.
Okay, so in terms of the time savings that we always hear about with going open source and Android, you need to kind of look at the way you do the project as well. There's you have to do the project in the right way to get the real gains in terms of time. Is that right?
Yes, I would say that's something that's really important, and it's something we've taken and adapted into the ComHam organization in general. Started working with that in order to try and gain some of the benefits that we saw within this project. I would say another thing that helped, not only from the project side, but also from a architectural decision, is that we decided fairly early in the project to use the same backend that we're using for the multi-screen solutions, meaning that the same backend is providing both the set-top box and the multi-screen, the iOS devices, the Android devices, the web devices, which then again gives us the same structural way of working within the set-top box that's basically just becoming another device in the multi-screen solution.
Okay, and very quickly, is that easier because you chose Android to sort of create a common backend, or does it make no difference?
No, I think it makes life easier as long as you work in a standardized way. And I think both the Technicolor and the Android solution are well integrated with good APIs, and it's fairly easy to do the integration between the different solutions based on this API way of working.
Okay, and just in 1 minute, give me the sort of the big lessons that you would pass on to somebody else who wants to do this. I mean, obviously the safe kind of approach would be a key one, but what else would you offer advice on?
I would say that make sure you have aligned the expectations of what to deliver and when. I would say when selecting the different solutions, you have various requirements on the technical capabilities and the deliveries and on the ability to fix things when they go wrong. And those need to be aligned. Then I think we've learned that you should select your chipset carefully. You should be aware of the differences between the chipsets and the functionalities and the features that they're providing. Okay.
Kai, on this safe scaled agile framework then, tell us how that works. I mean, Thomas mentioned it you align parties, you work on sort of 6 to 8 week kind of assignments, coordinate things, it saves time. Go through some of the other things that it involves, because it's quite a big kind of change in the way people work, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we're all in this industry so far mainly used to waterfall kind of project organizations, and you have a huge project plan that you build at the beginning of the project, Gantt charts, swim lanes, all this stuff, and then at the end of it, so you have a target, 12 months, 24 months launch, and during this time period, many things change. Yeah, and in the traditional approach, you always have to deal, in this case, with change requests, and it's always a cumbersome management of these kind of changing environment. When you apply SAFe, the Scaled Agile Framework, you really start to focus on the necessary things that bring value to the complete project. You can start working in parallel, but you focus mainly within these so-called product increments, which are 6 weeks to possibly 4 months, somewhere in between there. You really focus on what is the entire organization, because everybody is involved. It's the middleware partner, it's the hardware provider, it's the CAS provider, DRM provider, it's the back-end people, it's us from the front end, it's the operator. Everybody sits down together and defines what should be the outcome of the next product increment, which is going to be delivered in the described weeks. And then all the involved people, and you really have developers in the room. We have had workshops with other companies that are larger than 100 people, and believe it or not, there is a real outcome for this. It's manageable if you do it right. And everybody knows after these 1 or 2 days workshop, what is my role and what is my responsibility within the next product increment, and what do other parties rely on, what I need to deliver. And so it is a much, much higher involvement of everybody, because you know your part in the whole game, and you have a much higher motivation from all people as well. And because of that, first of all, you speed up the process, and then you become much more flexible, that after the first product increment, if the requirements or the specifications or the market, if something changes within the project and you reprioritize your features, and you say, okay, we think that we might not go live with feature A, but instead we want to include feature B because we see that the customers are having a high demand for that and are ranking it as more important. And during the project runtime, you can even change the priorities and come up with a much more better suitable product at the end, with which you launch. And I think this is the biggest benefit of SAFe in general: higher motivation, bigger involvement, more flexibility, focus on value creating things. And this in total is driving down the project runtime and is absolutely increasing the quality.
Okay. Does it also reduce risk then, Kai? I mean, if you work on kind of shorter runs and you can look at each stage as sort of an iteration, does it become less risky as well?
Yes, it does, because when you're used to having longer product increments that are beyond 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, you are not always sure what the outcome after this time will be. So when you shorten the time, you have many shorter sprints, and you have a concrete outcome after, well, not sprint is 2 weeks, but the product increment. So after every product increment, you have a concrete outcome, you know where you stand, you have a deliverable, you can completely evaluate and see where you stand. So it absolutely reduces risk by being much more transparent than previously.
Okay, and in very short answer, what kind of involvement is there for Google on a day-to-day basis? I mean, do you know, is it deeply embedded with yourselves and ComHem, or how's that work? Yes. I mean, the whole project as we started it, and Thomas mentioned that before, was a very close collaboration of all involved parties. And of course, Google with Android TV is making also steps to evolve and mature the platform. And so they were extremely helpful and supportive to provide detailed information, in-depth documentation. They were very responsive, and it really shows the big commitment that Google has in working with the TV operators. Yeah? And as a result of that, there is also a very close collaboration with all involved parties with Google. Yeah. Okay, and Gaetan, this is a multi-network deployment, as we mentioned at the start, so 2 services across 3 different kinds of networks. So how does that work for you in terms of the hardware? Is it pretty much the same implementation on each with just a few tweaks?
So one of the key elements is that it's the exact same device that is used all over the networks. Meaning that when it's a Boxer customer, it's using DVB-T. When it's cable customer, it's used over DVB-C, and when it's a fiber customer, it's using also purely over IP. So it's the exact same device. And what we're doing is that we are on the technical side, as part of the middleware development, for the part of the software that we do, we are doing all the implementation for all the broadcast part, the IPTV support, all these elements, and we're putting that behind the standardized API, which are the TIFF API, so the TV Input Framework. Which means that then from an applications perspective is just about zapping from one service to another service, okay? And basically zapping from one cable channel to another cable channel or cable to a DVB-T channel is actually the same way for the thing, okay? What is important is that what we are using is in the technology of the tuner that we have the capacity to have both DVB-T and DVB-C. Then there is some challenges that are linked to the first time installation, how you detect that you are over this type of network or this type of network. But what really, and this is the big value of what we are bringing into the implementation, is really shielding all that complexity so that in fact a company like 3SS that are working with us can really focus on bringing the right user experience so that the people can, the consumer can focus on consuming the content, whatever it's coming from, whatever it's all the things. And then all the rest is being hidden by us, and we add all the part, whether it's encrypted, not encrypted, that they have all the elements. All that part is shielded in the middleware of the element.
Okay. And Kai, in terms of the actual user interface or UX level that you're running, how do you ensure sort of a good experience across all these different networks? I mean, it's two brands as well, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It is two brands with different business models, different TV packages, and that would, in the traditional world, usually require two different applications on the boxes that are being shipped to the customer. Yeah, but as Gaetan said, we are building on one hardware, and the architecture that we have chosen for building 3Ready, our software, is actually that. Each box, when provisioned, is retrieving a remote configuration from one configuration endpoint, and that means that we can run the same application and make it still, for each box that's connected to the network, make the whole application look completely different, make it with different business models, different branding, different content, customer-specific content, and all that is done through a remote configuration.
Okay, and that's dynamic, is it? So the box sort of knows which network you're on and then loads it accordingly.
Absolutely, yeah. It's not only reliant on the network. It can be also customer groups, new customers versus long-time customers can retrieve different content, can even retrieve different features. So that is completely flexible in that sense.
Okay, and Gaetan, Android TV on a digital terrestrial network, I haven't heard about many of those. Is it fairly simple to deploy in terms of hardware, even on sort of what we would consider originally one-way broadcast networks? I mean, I know there's no TT element, but it's ultimately broadcast. Is it straightforward?
So this is something where we have a lot of experience, because we've been integrating since the first development we did 4 years ago on Android. We have always been integrating broadcast support. When we started with more mobile kind of chipset, it proves to be a little bit difficulties because there was not necessarily all the elements linked to the interlacing or the things. But since we switched back to chipset from broadcast technology, that from the moment they integrated the ARM CPU and GPU, I mean, we've been able to have a very good experience. We have today, I think, over 10 operators that are deployed today that are integrating broadcast in it. Some operators are using it clear broadcast. We have it in Australia, we have it in Italy, I think, and we have, in the case of COM, we are having really encrypted broadcast, encrypted DVB-T, encrypted DVB-C, but we are seeing also a lot of pickup on satellite operators. We have launched other operators would have Connex kind of security. We have many things, element. But the key point is that, in fact, and the integration of the broadcast part is quite transparent, and we've done that in several occasions.
Okay. Petter, back to security. How does the Android TV reference architecture make it easier? Well, how does it help in terms of the security implementation? Is it a sort of a nice kind of guideline that makes life very easy for you?
John, before I jump to the reference architecture, let me add to the previous discussion. What's interesting about the security aspect is that a lot of these, or many of these boxes, are actually connected in a way, and they have a return path. And so the way we design the content protection kind of makes it independent of how the actual content is delivered, whether it's a two-way IP streaming and delivery or whether it's a one-way broadcast. The security, the authentication, and the communication is really done independently of that. So we call that the hybrid CA system, and that's how we can bridge the different types of content delivery that you mentioned.
Okay, so that takes care of the DTT side as well. So okay, so Android reference architecture. Does that make how does that help you in terms of integrating the security?
Well, because it is a reference architecture, SoC vendors and set-top box vendors can really pre-integrate it both into the chip and into the rest of the set-top box hardware more easily, and most importantly, they can then reuse that design in other deployments, which then shortens the time to market for everybody. And in the latest version of Android, it also includes CA APIs, which then makes the integration of the CAS modules even easier than today. And the CA module can be plugged in using known and repeatable integration models and APIs. And also the details of how the CA module functions is much more isolated and transparent to the actual application developers.
Okay, so it's easy to reuse. Now, I've got a question for you later, but I may as well ask it now. I mean, is this a kind of a security implementation that can be easily ported somewhere else? I mean, is it much customization in terms of security between one operator or another?
We really take a kind of a layered approach. And as I said before, the security is really concentrating more and more into the actual SoC. And so we work with the SOC vendors. They build the SOCs with the right security, hardware security. We integrate our components into it, and we certify these chipsets really independent of the operator or even the operating system that eventually runs on these devices. So we try to do as much security work up front that is then reusable and repeatable by the set-top box vendors as well as operators. So there is very little customization from the actual content protection point of view.
Okay, and in terms of security certification, I mean, you mentioned the sort of, really the responsibility, it depends on what the content owner wants. And to make sure you meet the requirements, what do you need to think about in terms of hardware? Because we talked about trusted execution environment. I mean, is there more to that? Beyond, if you've got your trusted execution environment inside your SOC, you've done that, you've got your apps are kind of firewalled within the TEE. What else do you need to do to sort of hit the expectations of this market?
But again, it's all about layering your security defenses. And we start with the hardware security, and we work with the chip vendors early on, both for building the right key letters, personalizing the chipsets with the right unique keys and chip IDs, and also integrating the forensic watermarking right into the hardware. So it's really part of the hardware decoder So if the operator wishes to turn on watermarking for certain type of content, it is available in the chipset and can be enabled or disabled later on as they wish. So that's really the first layer, the first step, working with the chip vendors. Then you have the software components, which are inside the TEE. There's a lot of standardization within these TEEs, and we also provide a set of standardized APIs that are related to security and the trusted application communication across chipsets. So that also makes it easier later on for the middleware or the Android platform to abstract of which chipset is being used from a security point of view.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So and then just finally, very quickly, copy protection, is that taken care of by someone else, or is that part of your remit? Just a very quick answer.
Yeah, it's a combination. So the chipset supports output control, typically HDCP 2.2 for HDMI digital outputs. It's built into the chipset. It exposes control APIs, often inside the TEE. And the CA component brings the controls from the head end. So the operator decides, what the output controls are for specific channels or specific assets. And then we securely communicate that to the appropriate controls that are built into the chipset.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Right, so we'll have some more audience questions now. So there's Ed Follows at Foxtel. He's sent two in for you, Thomas. And the first one is, what was the size of the development team working on this in order to deliver it within 12 months?
I would say from the ComHem side, we mostly were involved in the UI part, in the back end, refactoring the back end. And it's a team of approximately 10 people. And from 3SS and Technicolor, there were more people involved, but I wouldn't really know the size of these teams. But yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll ask the other gentleman in a moment, but just another quick one for you, Thomas, also from Ed Follows at Foxtel. What part of the delivery was more complex than you anticipated? And, in hindsight, what would you have done differently?
I would say that the DTT integration, we haven't launched Boxer on DTT yet. That is still ongoing. Technicolor are working to comply with the Nordic specification. That is a requirement. And the integration of the Broadcom chipset seemed to be a bit harder than expected, I would say. We took a decision early in the project saying we wanted a new chipset that were highly compatible and would be able to provide us with a very good solution that we also saw as kind of a future-proof solution. But that also meant that we were the first customer within Technicolor to get that integration. And the technical capabilities within Technicolor were excellent. Working with Broadcom on the deliveries, well, we started seeing some issues, and then the ability to get things fixed once we started seeing issues on the Broadcom chipset, I would say that caused or are causing some kind of concern.
Okay. Now, I've got another question that's relevant to you, Thomas, from Norberto Harmath at Telecom Argentina. And he's asking how you can protect against Google changing their policies. And this is something we know that service providers do worry about, becoming too reliant on Google, and maybe they change the guidelines to something that you don't like later. Now, hopefully it will never happen. We know Google are taking this market really seriously now and are unlikely to want to do anything like that. But if it did, what can you do? Have you got a backup plan?
Yes, we do have a backup plan. Together with Technicolor, we've taken the precautions to make sure that we can replace the Android TV solution if needed. But I would say the the more operators that are moving in this direction, I would say that it becomes more and more likely that Google will behave and make sure to maintain on good terms with the operators. So we're happy to see that a lot of other operators are considering or even in the process of implementing, because I believe that this is becoming more of a standardized way of working, and it's taking over. And with that, I also believe that Google sees the benefits of being very close working with the operators. And during the process of the project, I think we've seen Google becoming more and more operator friendly.
Okay, so I mean, and that was the other question. What were they like to work with? I know Kai said it was great working with them. The same from your point of view?
I would say it's been a positive experience. There was a lot of concerns, especially on the flexibility and if we would get the opportunities and the solutions that we were trying to build, get them approved by Google, because they do have a certification that you need to be compliant with. But we saw that the cooperation is very interactive, and people were very responsive and good at giving us the feedback and helping us build the best solution capable of being somewhat best in the market.
Okay. Gaetan, voice and voice search and Google Assistant, we know that they will be very popular. They're already popular in terms of sort of the impact they could have on a UI. How does that affect you in terms of hardware, if that sort of roadmap becomes more important, whether at ComHem or elsewhere?
So the assistant integration is fairly smooth. I mean, it's a component, it's an APK that comes delivered by Google, and it works almost out of the box, provided that you have the right language. Okay, and we have example of deployment about that. What is the most challenging part on integrating the voice is the overall when the voice is in the remote, is the overall integration of the remote control is something that has quite a complexity, because it's based on Bluetooth protocols, and getting the right level of stability, getting the right level of performance, making sure that the battery are not drained, that you have the right quality of sound that is being transmitted. And it proves project after project is that it is one of the area where we have the most bugs in the project is related really to the remote integration and the support of these voice search capabilities. It's really adding a lot of complexity, and even though we have done multiple projects, every time when we move from one remote vendor to another remote vendor, there is a lot of work of integration. The good thing about this is that starting from Android P, so we could not benefit as part of this project, but starting from Android P, the API are getting much more standardized from Google side. It was recognized as an area of concern, and there is a lot of work that has been done to simplify that element. Okay, so that is one of the key. And for the voice is that when it's in the remote, is the overall Bluetooth protocol of the remote, and then we have cases of far-field voice integration of the set-top box. There, it's more about how you make sure that the microphones are well integrated with the mechanics, how you make sure that in fact the junction between the microphone, the plastic, that there is no reverberation, all these elements to getting to the right performance. Okay, but once you have captured the right signal, getting the assistant and the voice search working is something that goes mostly out of the box.
Okay. Kai, in terms of your 3-ready Android TV client, which is effectively the UI UX layer that goes on top of Android, what are the key benefits of that, in your opinion?
Mm-hmm. So when we started to develop 3-ready for the Android TV set-top box, we had two things in mind. So first of all, we saw that there is a driving demand for Android TV. And second of all, we also saw that there is a demand for cost-effective and fast-to-deploy set-top box solutions. So those were then, this was the driver for us to build 3-ready as we built it. So we have already on top of Android TV operator tier, we have many built-in pre-integrated features such as EPG, multi-language capabilities, Netflix pre-integration, and many, many more features that we can bring to the table. And this per se accelerates the launch date and makes the project more cost-effective. On top of that, we have integrated a lot of data analysis capabilities, and that is not only about the user itself that we can then analyze and analyze pay TV package, duration of customer relationship, the location. All these parameters are being dynamically or are analyzed, and then the configuration of the app can be dynamically targeted towards these parameters. So that's another big benefit when you choose 3Ready as a solution. You have a pre-integrated A/B testing capability, which is coming out of the web world, where you can see or analyze which features or which content or which layout is preferred by the overall user group or by specific user groups, and you can target again the UI to these user groups later. We basically packed in all our experience that we have generated through all of our Android projects over the last 5 years and packed it into this 3Ready solution to make it a really flexible and customizable solution with a quick time to market.
Okay, and still you, Kai, the universal search that is obviously a key part of Android TV and operator tier. It's an important thing for any sort of modern aggregator. I asked Thomas at the start how difficult it would be to do that yourself. I mean, what's your opinion on that? I mean, what would you need to do if you want to do that?
Yeah, from our point of view, in order to really generate valuable search results, you have to have quality access to all metadata. Because if you search a movie, Titanic, there are several versions of that movie Titanic, and you want to know if the latest version with DiCaprio is available on Netflix or from the operator or from other services. So you need to match the metadata. Yeah? Then you need to implement a cross-silo, meaning cross-app search mechanism on your own. And then on top, you would need to construct and implement the voice search capability. And all these three things together are actually quite complex. And Google has made a lot of pre-work in this direction because they have the TV input framework, which enables third-party apps to directly connect their metadata to this platform. And they have, of course, pre-implemented the voice and search mechanism and the voice recognition, and all together makes it almost impossible for operators of a certain size to build it on their own. Depending on the size, I would say it's possible to do. Like Swisscom, I mean, they did it because it was not available at the time, and they have, of course, also very specific demands in the Swiss market with the Swiss accent German language that is not always recognized by any voice engine. But in general, I would say with the Google pre-made thing, you're going on the right way.
Okay. Now, Thomas, I know one of the features of this deployment was the ability to do A/B testing. Did you use that at any point?
Yeah, we use that fairly often, especially on deciding on the UI. And since we tried to keep momentum in the project, we were doing it by having different UIs and bringing in people and getting the information needed. So definitely it was a big part of the way of working.
Okay, and that had did it have a meaningful impact on what you did in terms of your UI design or features that you offered?
I would say it was more small things that were changed and optimized, and we'll continue doing that. I think that's one of the major benefits that we have, that we can do many small updates during the year. We don't have to wait and collect everything into one big update. We can do multiple small incremental deliveries throughout the year, so the customers will have impact instantly. And that again gives us the possibility of do A/B testing with customers, because we can do various versions.
Okay, I've just got 2 questions to wrap up. One's from an audience member, and it's Peter Mitchell at Skystream Technology. It's to you, Thomas, and it's how did you go about getting Netflix approved for your device? Was it a long process from start to finish? Now, I assume that sort of comes with Android operator tier, does it?
Well, it does, but you don't really have the integration. You don't really have the integration by default. We have we had the possibility of doing the integration, so you have fully integrated Netflix. That means you have tiles of Netflix content being available in the recommended TV section. We do have the possibility of getting Netflix content from search, and it's really well integrated. But it is a strict process. Netflix have their way of doing it, and it's very professional. It was very efficient throughout the project, and it worked really well. We've had a very positive dialogue with Netflix. I would say that Netflix are also putting requirements on you, and it's not easy getting an agreement because of their way of doing things. And I would say that one thing that we decided early in the project was that we should provide not only broadcast TV, but also OTT. And by having 3 buttons and the Google YouTube application pre-installed, that those from the remote control, you would get access to 75% of the OTT consumption in the Swedish market. And therefore, it was fairly easy for us to decide that Netflix should have an important part of the launch.
Of course. Okay. Well, final question for the whole webcast then, because we're out of time, and it's to you, Thomas. And when you look back at Comhem TV Hub, I'm sure you look at home every day, what makes you most proud?
I think the team effort to change the mindset and the way of working to deliver in a very short time, not only from Comhem, but from all of the companies involved. And it really was a team effort to deliver a very holistic solution. We've moved away from just having a broadcaster-friendly set-top box to a sort of internet entertainment-friendly set-top box that's hopefully going to last for many years. At least we got the flexibility for upgrading and do the changes as the market changes.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And thank you to all our speakers, Thomas, Kai, Gaetan, and Petter. And thank you, everyone, for listening. If you do want to listen to this again, it is on demand and will be available fairly soon after we finish. So a big thank you from me for listening, and goodbye to you all.